Good Yontif. People often tell me that I resemble the actor Ben Stiller. Personally, I don't see it. But I do think that the rabbi that I am in some way reminds them of the rabbi that he portrays in the movie Keeping the Faith. He brought gospel music into his sanctuary. I brought gospel and rock music into ours in the form of Shabbat Unplugged. He is short, I am short. He has a full head of black hair. I used to have black hair. But this year, there is one additional point of resemblance. You see, in the movie's dramatic climax, he ascends to the bima and says to his congregation, "This Kol Nidre, I don't want to talk about the meaning of God or the situation in Israel. I want to talk about us, about the status of you and me." And friends, this Kol Nidre, I want to talk about us, about the status of you and me. You see, although rabbis at Temple Israel generally work without contracts, the temple has in the past made an exception for the final stages of our careers. And I am very pleased to share with you that the executive committee and I have mutually and lovingly agreed on what will be my final contract here at Temple. It calls for me to serve for 5 more years until age 70 as your rabbi on a full-time basis, and then to take a step back for a few additional years, just as my mentor, Rabbi Loss, has done before me. God willing, I will do so with a fraction of the spiritual leadership he has brought to this congregation since. Now, 5 years is a long time, and I do not want to turn this into a nostalgic, looking back type of sermon. I promise, there will be plenty more sermons to come, long and boring though they may be. Although I hope this one is not too boring, because it is about us, about you and me. Foreseeing the end of one's career focuses one's vision very clearly. As in life, when time is shorter, it gets more vividly seen and understood. And I feel like this new stage of my career has given me some clarity about where we are and where we need to be as a congregation. And I'd like to share a bit of that with you here on this holiest evening of the Jewish year. The first issue I'd like to discuss that lies between us is politics. Not any particular political issue, just politics in general. Friends, we as Americans and as Jews must stop viewing complex, ethical, moral, existential issues as some sort of team sport, where if someone dares to share an opinion that is attributed to the other team, we feel betrayed and become infuriated. First of all, let me be very clear. As rabbis, we are not on a team. We adhere assiduously to the Johnson Amendment and thus do not endorse candidates or weigh in on electoral politics. But we are allowed, and indeed we are charged with responsibility of bringing our Jewish tradition to bear on the issues of the day. To give you some insight into what our lives as rabbis have been like these past few years, this summer, I was scolded by one congregant who accused me of, quote, caving into our wealthy Republican donors, unquote, and by another demanding that I stop sharing my leftist political views on the Bima in response to a sermon that I delivered about the ecology on Eco Shabbat. This all in the same week. Now, don't worry about me. I have thick skin. I am old and set in my ways, which, by the way, defy any partisan designation. As you know, I am staunchly pro-Israel, a position that some ascribe to the right, while in actuality, Israel is the only beacon of liberal values, voting rights, women's rights, gay rights in the entire Middle East. But then, on the issue of the ecology, clearly, at least according to my friend, I am on the team associated with the left, which makes no sense either, since conservation, conserving that which is good about the past, is at the philosophical heart of conservatism. They are literally the same word. That said, believe me when I tell you that we strive constantly to strike a balance, because we do believe passionately that every Jew should feel at home in this congregation. Democrat, Republican, independent, it matters not. But no one of any party should come to a Jewish service expecting never to have their assumptions questioned, because that is what our tradition does. It questions assumptions. These are moral and ethical issues after all. And Judaism has a lot to say about morality and ethics. Indeed, I would venture to say that we invented the concepts. So, if your assumptions are brought into question by one of us, we invite you to engage with us, to argue with us, to debate us. We actually love it, but not to stifle us. More important, not to stifle them. Because when my career does come to an end, we are going to need a new young rabbi to join us. And it is very important to my legacy that the rabbi who comes after me is a great rabbi. But no young, talented rabbi is coming to Detroit, Michigan, if they learn that on this bima, rabbis are discouraged from speaking freely about the important issues of the day through the lens of our Jewish tradition. I am very sorry to share this with you, but it is the truth. Now, a sermon about you and me cannot be all about the changes that I want you to make. Indeed, what I most wanted to do this evening is to lift up the many ways that you have changed me. And perhaps the most important lesson that I have learned from all of you is that miracles really do happen. Some of you will remember, if you are old enough, that in my second sermon to you on the High Holy Days, I shared my very rational, scientific approach to theology. After being treated to Rabbi Syme's much more traditional God images for decades, I am not sure that the sermon went over that well. But while my theological vision is still a rational one, it has become increasingly spiritual and indeed mystical because of all of you. Just this past April, for instance, I married Sydney Pappenheim to her beloved right here on this bima. Now, her mom, Lisa, had been very ill, and so we decided to move the wedding up from its original fall date, which gave her grandmother only 10 days to plan a full wedding with the dress and the cake and the whole bit. But then a few days before the wedding, Lisa went into yet another coma, and I feared it was all for naught. On Friday, I received the call that she had been discharged not only from the ICU, but from the hospital as well. And on Sunday, she flowed into the wedding, in a wheelchair to be sure, but dressed in the most beautiful gown and literally glowing with joy as she danced the night away at her daughter's simcha. It may have been a small miracle, since sadly she passed away not too long after. But friends, I tell you, it was a miracle, and I was blessed to be there to experience it with her. And that is just one of the many ways that you have changed me. You have no idea how grateful I am for your many spiritual lessons about love and loss and altruism and courage. I would not be the rabbi I am, I would not be the man I am without you. But there is one other uncomfortable elephant in the room that we must discuss together if we are going to be completely honest with each other this evening. And that is those 5 cameras that are recording and streaming this service to the internet. When COVID hit, as you know, your clergy went into hyper-action to create beautiful, meaningful online worship experiences for you. Our first High Holy Days were essentially a series of well-produced spiritual movies which were so powerful that they received significant national attention and were viewed by tens of thousands of people around the world. For a while there, I was thinking of moving to Hollywood. For I must tell you, it was interesting, it was innovative, it was creative, it was fun. But now, it has gone just a bit too far. Oh, we are still streaming this service for the sake of the homebound, those who are immunocompromised, and our members who live far away. And yes, we do understand that it is sort of cool to watch services sitting in your pajamas with a glass of Chardonnay. Hopefully no Chardonnay on Yom Kippur, of course, but you know what I mean. In any case, my point is that it is time to come home. Tomorrow, we are holding services with 3 different COVID comfort levels. For those who prefer to pray in our gorgeous and extremely well-ventilated sanctuary, but with the security of knowing that everyone is wearing a mask, you can join us at 11:30. If you prefer not to wear a mask or don't care if others are unmasked, you can come to our 9:15 service. And if you only feel safe praying outdoors, join us at the 2 p.m. service in our glorious outdoor pavilion for a service which will also be family-friendly, so bring your kids and grandkids along as well. For as magnificent a job as our tech team does streaming these services online, they are so much better here in person. By the way, the congregation is shaking their head enthusiastically up and down. So, if you are physically, medically, geographically able, we invite you, we implore you to consider joining us here once again in person, perhaps for the first time in years. Why? Because we miss you. Even more, because we need you. There are those who are predicting that our new Zoom online post-pandemic reality will spell the doom of synagogue life in North America. But that would be a tragedy. For although Immanuel Kant was not a Jewish philosopher, His concept of the categorical imperative was very Jewish. He suggests that before making any ethical decision, you ask yourself this question: what would happen if everyone chose to act as I am acting? For those who have become distanced from synagogue life over the past 3 years, we get it. COVID is scary and isolating. Plus, we live in a transactional society. We pay dues to get a service. So what happens when one can obtain those religious services online for free? We stop showing up, or perhaps even worse, we eschew synagogue membership entirely. Unless, that is, we ask ourselves Kant's simple question: what would happen if every Jew made the decision that I am making? Well, here is what would happen. There would be no generation of committed Jews to come after us, and no rabbi or cantor to perform your children's weddings or loved ones' funerals. Jewish life cycle events would become relics of the past. Social services in our community would be greatly reduced. There would be a dearth of adult education as well as Jewish cultural and social events. Teen engagement would diminish. Support for Israel would decline. There would be no Shabbat or High Holy Day services to attend, and eventually none to watch either. There would be no place to go to say Kaddish for our loved ones. And finally, we as a Jewish community would be forever diminished by the loss of this 2,000-year-old mainstay of Jewish life. I'm afraid that we would ask ourselves, how did we let such a precious legacy slip away? So, whether you enjoy or are challenged by the rabbi's sermon, whether your theology is rational or mystical, whether you are feeling connected or disconnected after 3 years of isolation, this is our time to return home. For after 36 years as your rabbi, what I can tell you about this place is that it is home, and the best of homes at that. I don't want to brag, but when I was ordained from rabbinical school, I received 18 offers of employment all around the country. And yet, I chose Temple Israel in the Midwest, no less, because of you, because of the people. And then, when my father came to install me as your rabbi and met all of you, he put his hands on my shoulders and said in Yiddish, "Arangefallen, son, you have fallen into a good place." And so I had, because this is home. Us, you and me, and my colleagues who truly are the finest clergy team in the nation, and our hundreds of volunteers, and our amazing staff, and our incredible new executive director, all of you here, and yes, you too, out there on your couches. It is time for us to come together once again. We need you, and I do believe that you need us as well. Now, if this were a movie, this is the point where the gospel choir would come in singing and clapping their hands. Tonight, instead, we conclude with a beautiful anthem, a song that I asked Aaron Markovitz, our new Zipser Foundation artist in residence, to write for the High Holy Day welcome video that you all received via email. As it happens, it also became the inspiration for this sermon, and I do believe for this next and last stage of my career as your rabbi as well. It is a song about us, about you and me, about you and us. And it is entitled simply, Come On Home.